I stole my sister's man. While she was abroad for a year, the man she'd been pining over for ages showed up at my door with her picture. "Do you know this girl?" he asked. I pulled down my mask, revealing a face identical to my sister's, and smiled sweetly. "Are you looking for me?" Ethan Hughes was skeptical at first. I didn't have the mole by my eye. 2 years ago, I said, we were trapped together in a blizzard in the Rockies. The rescue team was delayed. You said if we survived, you'd find me. You wrote your name on my palm, I continued, but I suffered retrograde amnesia and forgot you. I had the mole removed. See, there's a tiny scar. Ethan was half convinced. Is it really you? I leaned in close and whispered, so, Mr. Hughes, given up on painting? What a shame. Ethan, the highly anticipated heir to the Hughes fortune, secretly harbored no desire for business. He wanted to be an artist. He'd only told Ashley Williams this secret. I embraced him, and he didn't pull away. He believed me. Ashley hadn't clearly stated her name during the blizzard, and Ethan only had a photo. I easily started dating him, using my own identity. He had his suspicions, though. Once, he asked me to play the piano. My wrist was permanently injured in the blizzard, I lied. I can't play anymore. Ethan narrowed his eyes. But you used to say the piano was your life. Was it painful to give up painting? I countered. However painful it was for you, it was the same for me. He fell silent. Another time, he discovered Ashley's existence. Sarah Williams, you told me you were an only child. I lied, I replied. I have a twin sister, but I hate her. Ashley had pretended to be an only child, erasing me from the narrative. I wasn't going to be polite. Ethan's eyes turned cold. Why do you hate her? I lifted my shirt, revealing my figure, marred by several scars. Ethan, I began, my voice trembling, you always ask about these scars. I'll tell you today. When I was 7, my sister and I stumbled into a human trafficking ring. She escaped, but I was sold and taken to the mountains. They beat me, burned me with cigarettes. The doctors say the scars will never fade. I sobbed, a picture of vulnerability. No man could resist. I wasn't rescued until I was 14. I've hated her every single day since. She's a constant reminder of that despair and pain, like these scars. I'm sorry, Ethan. I was so hurt, that's why I lied. Ethan softened, his harsh features melting away. I'm sorry, I was too harsh. Don't cry, Sarah. While he kissed my scars, I popped a grape-flavored candy in my mouth. The sweet scent filled the air. I knew Ethan didn't love me. He was with me out of obligation and that promise he'd made. He must have been confused, wondering why he couldn't recapture the feelings he'd had in the mountains. It's because I wasn't the girl he'd met. I made sure to eat a grape candy before every kiss. I wanted him to remember me every time he saw or smelled grapes, to recall our intimate moments. Do I feel guilty? Of course not. I'm the villain of this story. Villains don't have consciences. A year ago, I realized I was living in a book. Ashley was the kind-hearted protagonist, and I was the jealous, wicked older sister. My character arc was outlined as follows: a celebrated piano prodigy until the age of 7, then abducted, vanishing without a trace. Upon returning, I was bitter and resentful, jealous of Ashley. I sabotaged her and interfered with her relationship with Ethan. But Ethan, ever faithful, ignored me. My unrequited love led me to darker impulses, ultimately resulting in a tragic end. A few sentences summarized my entire existence. But the reality was this: after I was kidnapped, my parents initially searched for me. But once, preoccupied with my case, they missed Ashley's high fever. They almost lost their other daughter. After that, they decided to focus on what they had left and poured all their energy into Ashley. The search for me became less and less of a priority. Ashley, naturally gifted, quickly replaced me as the piano prodigy. Gradually, no one mentioned my name. Everyone assumed I was dead. Due to my family's lack of effort, it took the police 7 years to find me. Years of hard labor in the mountains had permanently damaged my wrist, ending my piano career. I could only watch Ashley perform. My parents, burdened by guilt, treated me with polite distance, like a guest. They claimed they treated us equally, but privately they'd say, "Ashley is so much more thoughtful," or, "Of course, we raised Ashley ourselves, it's not the same." In contrast, Ashley's character was described as intelligent and kind, constantly burdened by guilt over my kidnapping. Meeting Ethan healed her, allowing her to finally forgive herself. Oh, forgive herself. How noble. Looking back, Ashley was indeed kind. When classmates mocked me, she'd step in, a saintly figure. "Don't bully my sister. She's been through a lot." When asked what I'd been through, she'd say mysteriously, "I can't talk about it." Soon, the whole school knew about my kidnapping. She basked in praise and admiration, while I endured more intense ridicule. Sarah doesn't deserve a sister as good as Ashley. Ashley's a piano prodigy, what can Sarah even do? How can twins be so different? Ashley has felt guilty for years, and Sarah still won't forgive her. Is she being petty? See? I was a prop, meant to highlight Ashley's virtues. Ethan's arrival worsened the situation. Naturally, aloof, he was fiercely protective of Ashley and treated me cruelly. Even my eventual death, alone and forgotten in the wilderness, was partly his fault. After reading the entire story, I made a decision. No more playing the victim. I would embrace my villainous role and turn the tables. I tried various tactics, but the protagonist's halo was too strong. I figured if I could at least make their lives miserable, that would be something. So, I pursued Ethan. I pretended to be deeply in love with him. His parents adored me, and his friends sang my praises. But the day after our engagement, Ashley rushed back. She really had suffered from amnesia after the blizzard, but upon hearing my fiancé's name, it all came flooding back. I then witnessed the most cliched scene imaginable. Ashley, frail and delicate, played a piano piece for Ethan. "Ethan Hughes, open your eyes and see. I'm the one who was with you in the blizzard. I told you, the mole by my eye is my defining feature. How could you forget?" Ethan, shocked, turned to me. "What's going on? Sarah Williams, explain yourself." I smiled sweetly. "Ethan, you're being so mean. Didn't you promise last night you wouldn't be mean to me anymore?" Ashley's face paled. I continued, "Ethan, I'm the one who's been by your side day and night. You decide who to believe." My lies crumbled quickly, though. Ashley had our parents corroborate her story. 2 years ago, she was the one who went to the Rockies. She was the one who played the piano. Her wrists were fine. And the mole had always been her distinguishing feature. But there was one loose end. How did I know everything about the blizzard? Faced with Ethan's questioning, Ashley hesitated before replying. "I told my sister about it." She lied. She never told me. I knew because I'd read the book. She must have been puzzled, but without that lie, she couldn't exclude me from the narrative. I'd caused enough chaos that the engagement was called off. Friends and family, having heard the story through the grapevine, berated me for being shameless. My parents called me a disgrace to the family, saying I should have stayed lost in the mountains. The angrier they were, the happier I became. Annoying hypocrites was immensely satisfying. The last time I saw Ethan, he was with Ashley, picking out an engagement ring. My actions had embarrassed him, and he felt he owed Ashley. He needed to make amends quickly. As soon as I appeared, Ashley clung to his arm as if I might steal him away. "Don't worry," I said, "I've already had my fun." Ethan's face tightened. "Sarah Williams, is anything you say true?" "Probably not," I replied. I knew it, the kidnapping story, that was fake too, wasn't it? You made up that lie just to smear Ashley. I glanced at Ashley, her lips trembling with guilt. When she didn't speak, I chuckled. Oh, it was. Ethan's disappointment was palpable. He looked at me with coldness and disgust. You're toxic, Sarah. I don't want to see you again. Don't worry, I'm just here to deliver a wedding gift. I don't want your gift, Ashley exclaimed. That's fine, it's for the groom. I tossed the box into Ethan's arms. He hesitated, then pulled the ribbon. Inside, nestled among tissue paper, were dozens of grape-flavored candies. The sweet scent filled the air. Ethan froze. As he'd wished, I left after delivering my gift. I left completely. Only later did I find out they never married, because Ethan soon woke up. He discovered the book 5 months after I disappeared from his life. He nearly lost his mind. I hadn't been idle during my year with Ethan. I'd leveraged his connections to build my own wealth and network. My departure wasn't about him. It was a strategic move to a new city, a new career. Ethan searched for me relentlessly. He finally found me in New York 2 months later. It was hard to miss me. My face was plastered on billboards all over the city. I'd become a model. Ethan found my studio and asked to see me. He stood before my giant billboard, transfixed. I approached him from behind. Do I look good? You look good. He turned, as if trying to absorb 7 months of separation in a single glance. Sarah, really good. His eyes reddened. I wasn't interested in reminiscing. I'm busy, Mr. Hughes. Please be brief. The formality startled him. Sarah, I want to apologize. I'm a jerk. I did so many things wrong. Stop, I interrupted, raising an eyebrow. What did you do? I shouldn't have doubted you that day, shouldn't have pushed you away when you needed me, shouldn't have let you disappear without doing anything. Except for the first part, everything else was straight from the book. Ethan had regained his self-awareness. Since you've read the story, I said, you should know that everything I did, everything that deviated from the plot, was revenge. I know, Sarah. I accept it all. You can be even crueler to me. Just forgive me. Forgive? I chuckled, lighting a cigarette. I'm the villain. Forgive isn't in my vocabulary. Ethan hung his head, his eyes even redder. It was hard to imagine this was the same aloof, arrogant man. Finally, he asked, his voice thick with emotion, Sarah Williams, did you ever love me? Yes, I loved you to death, I said, lying without hesitation. I paused, then added, just kidding. Ethan's flicker of hope died. Seeing his expression, I couldn't help but laugh. Ethan, how do you always fall for my tricks? From now on, I'll believe everything you say, Sarah. Just forgive me. Forgive, again. I stubbed out my cigarette and stepped closer. When the police rescued me, I weighed 60 pounds. I looked like a skeleton with 2 eyeballs glued on. I leaned in and whispered it was winter. The snow almost buried the mountain. I was wearing summer clothes, my wounds exposed. Ethan, do you know how ugly I was? I looked up at the billboard, my image staring back, dark hair, red lips, a naturally seductive, almost defiant beauty. You can't imagine, you can't empathize. You understand nothing, yet you expect my forgiveness. Isn't that laughable? Ethan's face was pale. I told him I had a boyfriend, several in fact. He didn't believe me, but with a little digging, he'd discover I wasn't lying. I changed boyfriends faster than he could keep up. Perhaps in the original story, I truly loved him. But now, awake and aware, I loved myself more. To my surprise, Ethan persisted. A few days later, he showed up again. He found me in a dimly lit bar. I've made inquiries, Sarah. Your boyfriends are all show, none of them are serious. So, break up with them. I'll give you all of Hugh's resources. I laughed. I don't need them. Then what do you want? I glanced towards a corner where a man sat. I'd noticed him earlier. Even with his back turned, his broad shoulders, narrow waist, and the lean muscle straining against his shirt were impossible to ignore. I pointed. I like that type now. Not your type anymore. Ethan's face darkened. Under his watchful gaze, I walked over and tapped the man's shoulder. Hey there, handsome. Want to come see my kittens? The man turned around. My smile vanished. I would never forget that face. Alex Shaw, the police officer who, at 14, had kicked open the cellar door and pulled me out of the darkness. I practically fled. I'd wanted to torment Ethan, make him watch me flirt with another man. But in the end, I didn't care anymore. I hoped Alex didn't recognize me. That night, the dreams returned. The year of the heavy snow in the mountains. I'd finally stolen a bottle of pesticide. One sip and it would all be over. As I twisted off the cap, the cellar door burst open. Light flooded in. Alex reached out to me. Don't be afraid, I'm here to rescue you. He gave me his coat, his unfamiliar warmth enveloping me. What's your name? He asked. My voice was hoarse. Sarah Williams. Sarah, what a beautiful name. Today, in the snow, you'll be reborn. Hearing those words, my numb nerves finally sparked. I cried uncontrollably, soaking the collar of his coat. Later, to calm me down, Alex told me many things. I've notified your parents. After the DNA test, you can go home with them. To be honest, this is my first human trafficking case. You're the first person I've rescued. You have to live a good life, Sarah. I believe a brand new life is waiting for you. Looking back, Alex was in his early 20s then, fresh out of the academy, full of idealism. And I was at my ugliest. He was my savior, but strangely, I didn't want to see him, couldn't bear to see him. Because after the snow, I wasn't reborn. I slipped into a different kind of slow death. Of all the people in the world, he was the one I least wanted to know about it. I woke up to a barrage of messages. Sarah, what's going on with your sister? She's trashing you in the media. My phone's blowing up with reporters. My agent sent me a link. The headline screamed, Rising supermodel Sarah Williams accused of stealing sister's man. Ashley performed around the country. She was a public figure, at least to some extent. Her accusations carried weight. The story went viral. My agent panicked. How could your sister do this? But it's true, I said, although she'd embellished and exaggerated quite a bit. Even if it's true, we can't let them drag your name through the mud. Relax, I replied, unfazed. This kind of publicity is gold. We'd usually have to pay for this level of attention. There's no such thing as bad press. You've got nerves of steel, she muttered. Not just nerves of steel, I also knew how to play the game. While the internet was roasting me, I posted some selfies. My follower count actually increased. Someone commented they might look alike, but Ashley's a delicate flower, while Sarah's got this icy, dangerous beauty. It's captivating. Excellent observation. I liked the comment. And, of course, my accidental like made headlines. I issued a clarifying tweet, not an accident. I meant to like that. The hate intensified, but so did my fan base. While I was enjoying this wave of infamy, Ethan stepped in. He held a live stream. Sarah had nothing to do with it. I pursued her. She's the one I've always loved. One sentence cleared my name and slapped Ashley across the face. The drama died down quickly. I was disappointed. Ashley's protagonist halo protected her. She emerged relatively unscathed. But the annoyance I'd caused her was enough. With me, the irredeemable villain, in the picture, she couldn't win. Ethan, however, had burned his bridges with Ashley by publicly lying for me. He waited for me outside my apartment the next day. Sarah, did you see? I saw. From now on, I'll always protect you. I won't let you suffer like that again. Thanks for that, I said dryly. He seemed relieved, then asked hopefully, so, can we get back together? Nope. I smiled innocently. You did that on your own. I didn't promise you anything. I happened to be wearing grape-scented perfume that day. The wind carried it towards him, and he seemed momentarily lost in thought. I had work and didn't have time for him. Today was the model casting for Zun, a top-tier brand. I had to nail this opportunity. I wasn't the front runner, though. The other models had more experience. One of them, Alina, was Ashley's friend. She looked down her nose at me. Someone with your reputation thinks they can compete with me? I ignored her, which only fueled her anger. Who are you rolling your eyes at? I'm your senior. Someone like you will be kicked out of this industry soon enough. Oh. Sarah Williams, don't tell me you actually think you have a chance, she sneered. The brand's sending a big shot today. Everyone's going all out. You don't stand a chance. That piqued my interest. What big shot? Alina refused to tell me, but someone else spilled the beans. The owner, of course. Usually, castings were handled by managers and designers. It was rare for the owner to attend. Everyone started gossiping. Zun was a leading fashion brand, originally with a single owner. Then, the owner brought his younger brother, who'd been off doing his own thing, back into the fold to co-inherit the business. The big shot today was this newcomer, the second owner. Before we could hear more, a staff member appeared. Our next season focuses on activewear, specifically sports bras. Please remove your jackets and change into the provided camisoles. I froze. The camisoles were cropped. I had scars on my waist. I'd tried numerous treatments to reduce the scarring, but faint marks remained. I hadn't known about the cropped tops and hadn't brought concealer. When I emerged from the changing room, all eyes were on me. I knew scars were a major no-no for models. Alina smirked. Sarah, why don't you just go home? I smiled calmly. I'm here now. Though, honestly, I had little hope. The staff member announced, our co-owner is inside. Please keep quiet, he dislikes noise. The models entered in groups. Alina and I were in the same group, with me at the front of the line. I pushed open the door. A familiar face sat in the center of the judging panel. Alex Shaw looked up, his eyes meeting mine. So much had changed. Yet, across the room, separated by time and circumstance, we were once again face to face. I stared, stunned, until the staff prompted me to move forward. What was Alex doing here? Could he be Zun's co-owner? Sure enough, the other judges treated him with deference, addressing him as Mr. Shaw. The book barely mentioned Alex, only in my flashbacks, so I knew nothing about his background. Had doing his own thing meant becoming a cop? Confused, I walked towards the panel. Number 17, what happened to your waist? Old injuries, I replied. Unfortunately, our product is a sports bra, a cropped style. Alina was smirking. The judge continued, this won't work. You can leave. Wait, Alex interrupted. His voice was low and deep. His hair, now longer, was styled in a mullet, giving him a casual, almost languid air. He was a far cry from the clean-cut police officer he'd once been. Back then, his hair had been short, and to make me laugh, he'd let me touch it. Alex walked towards me. He was as tall as I remembered, but the youthful awkwardness was gone, replaced by a powerful masculine presence. What's your name? Sarah. Sounds familiar. Have we met? He didn't remember? Good. You might have seen my billboards, I offered. How old are you? He asked. 22. So, 14, 8 years ago. He drew out the last word, a hint of something in his tone. He pointed. Stand under that light. It was standard procedure. The light revealed bone structure. He seemed to be studying my lines at close range. Then, in a voice so low only I could hear, he said, about those kittens, are they still up for adoption? My heart leapt into my throat. He remembered the bar. But he didn't necessarily connect me to the girl he'd rescued. Back then, I was a skeletal, unkempt 14-year-old, a completely different person. I met his gaze and smiled. Sure are, I purred, matching his low tone. Alex said nothing more. He went through the motions of the casting, then dismissed us to wait for the results. I was the last to leave. Alex lingered by the elevators, seemingly waiting, yet not for anyone in particular. As I stepped into the elevator, he followed. How do you feel? He asked. Confident about landing the campaign? I shrugged. It's not up to me. How long have you been modeling? A year. He seemed surprised. That's impressive. Not many achieve this level of success in a year. You flatter me, Mr. Shaw. I may be new to the industry, but I've been preparing for a long time. After waking up to the reality of the book, I'd started planning my escape. The elevator doors were mirrored, reflecting our images. After a long silence, he asked, What happened by your eye? A minor accident. I cover it with makeup for shoots. It's invisible. Why there? He persisted. It was an accident, I said vaguely. His next question erased my smile. Because you thought with that mole, you might be as lucky as your sister? In that instant, I was completely exposed. The descent from the top floor felt like it took 8 years. I remembered that other elevator ride 8 years ago, the silence between us as we went for my DNA test. But I was different now. I was hardened, deceitful, a master of disguise. I smiled easily. So, Officer Shaw, you do remember me. How could I forget? He replied softly. You were the first person I rescued. I'm eternally grateful, I said formally. He didn't reply. I changed the subject. By the way, how did you become Zen's co-owner? My father founded the company, but I always dreamt of being a cop. I applied to the academy behind my family's back. After graduation, I practically disowned them to join the force. And then, my father passed away. My sister took over as CEO, nearly worked herself to death. So I resigned and came back to help her. He glanced at my reflection in the elevator doors. My heart skipped a beat. He wasn't telling the whole truth. There was more to the story, something that seemed to involve me. The doors opened, thankfully. Just before I stepped out, Alex asked, Sarah Williams, would you mind if people saw your scars? I wouldn't. Good. Wait for my call. I landed the Zen campaign. The industry was shocked. Word had spread about my scars after the casting. Brands requiring skin exposure had already written me off. But Zen did the opposite, choosing me, flaws and all. The campaign's message, embrace your true self. The billboards went up, sparking a debate. I never realized scars could be beautiful, one comment read. Damn, that icy beauty, even hotter with scars. I have scars too, and I've always been self-conscious. But seeing this makes me want to hit the beach. My face was everywhere. I knew Ashley and my parents would see it. This was the best revenge, reaching heights they couldn't touch, becoming better than ever. When Ethan came to see me again, I turned him down firmly. Ethan, I'm not interested in getting back together. Don't waste your time. His eyes dimmed with hurt and disappointment. Sarah, can't you give me another chance? Seeing him plead, I dropped the playful act. I'm sorry, I can't love you. There was no guarantee the original plot wouldn't unfold, perhaps playing out in some parallel universe. He managed a weak smile. Then promise me one thing. Stay away from abandoned factories. What do you mean? Just promise. Ethan, what do you know? Nothing, he said, looking away. During winter, homeless people often seek shelter in abandoned factories. They get into fights, steal, it's dangerous. Just stay away. All right, I agreed. Finally, he said, Sarah, I wish you happiness. I shrugged. Someone as wicked as me probably won't find happiness. Yes, you will, he insisted, with an unnerving certainty, as if he'd glimpsed the future. With my career booming, my value skyrocketed. I once again became the successful acquaintance in the eyes of former classmates and relatives. The same relatives who had called me shameless now begged for my autograph. Ashley, of course, noticed this shift. She refused to be overshadowed. One day, Alex asked me to dinner. Since we started working together, we'd interacted occasionally. Dinner was perfectly normal. He mentioned that the company had received Ashley's resume. Applying for what? I asked. Modeling. I nearly choked on my water. Modeling? Yes, he confirmed, his long fingers holding a cigarette. The scent of tobacco was faint, a cool, almost metallic tang, like his own scent. She seems to want to replace you. It clicked. We were identical. If I could do it, why couldn't she? The piano hadn't brought overnight fame, so she wanted to try modeling? I texted my agent. Give Ashley some work. Did you lose your mind? Or am I hallucinating? Nothing too big. And don't let her know it came from us. Got it, you're ruthless. Who are you texting? Alex asked. My agent. Male? Female? Good. I looked at him, puzzled, but he just exhaled a plume of smoke as if he'd spoken casually. After dinner, we walked out of the restaurant. Across the street, a men's underwear ad hung in a shop window. The model had a good physique, undeniably attractive. I stared, wondering how to get his number. I didn't notice the tension building beside me. Suddenly, my vision went dark. Alex's hand covered my eyes. His palm, calloused from his years as a cop, brushed against my cheek, a strange sensation. Don't look at that, he murmured. I'm 22, I protested. Still a kid. He paused, then added in a low, husky voice, not as good-looking as me. Ashley, fueled by the initial success from the work I'd arranged, became reckless, skipping several piano performances. The organizers and the Piano Association were furious. But she didn't care. Modeling was more lucrative, faster track to fame. It was all going according to plan. She tasted the bait, now I'd reel her in. I offered her more opportunities, all conflicting with her piano engagements. She skipped one performance after another, unknowingly making enemies. The internet backlash was swift. Ticket holders accused her of being unprofessional. Let her enjoy the dream a little longer. In my free time, I liked to wander the city. But one day, something unexpected happened. I was sitting in a cafe when I saw a middle-aged man talking to a young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, outside the window. The man offered her candy, which she accepted. He patted her head. Come on, let's go find your mommy. Every hair on my body stood on end. Wasn't this how kidnappings happened? The girl's small figure overlapped with my own past self. I instinctively sent my location to Alex, then ran out of the cafe. I followed the man. He kept looking around as if wary. You're 8, right? He asked the girl. No, I'm 7. She corrected. My breath hitched. I was about to intervene when I saw the glint of a new knife in his shopping bag. No, I couldn't be impulsive. I had to wait for Alex. The man led the girl out of the mall, towards a less crowded side street. Just then, Alex arrived. I couldn't speak too loudly. Alex understood. He grasped my trembling hand. I'll go with you. He has a knife. If things get ugly, run and get help. I nodded. As we approached, Alex prepared to confront the man, but the little girl suddenly skipped forward. Mommy! Mommy? Both Alex and I froze. A woman embraced the child. Were you being difficult with your uncle? He's only visiting for a short time. You be nice to him. It was a relative. A false alarm. Thank God. You can relax now, Alex began, turning to me. I was crouched on the ground, sobbing. I didn't know why I was crying. I'd been so terrified, reliving my own trauma, desperate to save that little girl. When it turned out to be a misunderstanding, the tension snapped, releasing a flood of tears. He was her uncle, not a kidnapper. Thank God. The little girl, hearing my cries, turned around. Why is that lady crying? She skipped over and offered me her last piece of candy. Here, take this. I clutched the candy, my fingernails digging into my palm. Every breakdown was a battle against my past. Winning meant making peace. But so far, I hadn't won a single battle. Sarah, Alex said, his voice strained. I looked up. He stood against the fading light, just like he had all those years ago. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Alex stayed with me, quiet and present. I suddenly felt the need to confess, to tell someone everything I'd done, including the charade with Ethan. Alex listened calmly, then said, I know. Of course he did. With his connections, it wouldn't have been difficult to find out. Am I terrible? I asked. No. Don't try to comfort me. I'm not. Sarah, I've always known about your pain. I was surprised. He settled into a leather chair, his dark eyes like deep pools. I haven't been entirely honest with you. The reason I left the force, it was because of you. I'd been right. Sarah, when you were 18, were you working at a restaurant? How did you know? After graduating high school, I'd started planning my escape from the Williams family. I took a job to save money. That summer, I was in Chicago on business and happened to have dinner at that restaurant. I met your parents. Alex slowly revealed a story I'd never known. He was still a police officer then. He was in Chicago, reluctantly attending a business dinner for his family. He hated these events, the superficial conversations, the lack of genuine connection. He sat in a corner, listening to the empty chatter. My parents were there, boasting about their daughter who'd been accepted into a prestigious music school abroad. Their pride was obvious. Someone asked, Mr. Williams, I heard you have another daughter? My father's face stiffened. He waved his hand dismissively. Let's not talk about her. Alex's heart sank. I arrived to serve their table. My father was surprised. What are you doing here? He blurted out. Mr. Williams, you know this waitress? Someone asked. Flustered, my father lied. A friend's child. Huh, I knew it. Mr. Williams' daughter wouldn't be working as a waitress. I left without a word. In that moment, Alex understood. From that day on, he'd carried a burden. He'd rescued me with such hope, believing I'd return to a happy life. But the reality was so cruel. Later, when his own family faced a crisis, Alex resigned from the force. He finished his story and took a sip of water. Sarah, I tried to imagine what you were going through, and it broke my heart. I tortured myself, wondering if I'd truly rescued you. I couldn't find the answer. Don't blame yourself, I said. My family's treatment of me wasn't your fault. Alex smiled. See? You haven't even made peace with your past, yet you're comforting me. How is that wicked? He reached out and gently touched the scar by my eye. Sarah Williams, he said, his voice soft, I have a request. What is it? Let me love you. I stared at him, speechless. All my practiced flirtations, my carefully constructed defenses, seemed to crumble. When did you? That night at the bar. Or maybe even earlier, at your graduation. Graduation? Yes. Last June. I suddenly remembered you were graduating. I went to your school, and I saw you. And then I stood not far from you, watching you move your tassel, taking pictures. Honestly, my heart was racing. You were all grown up, a stunningly beautiful woman. I couldn't take my eyes off you. It took a moment to process. I don't believe you, I said, my default setting kicking in. After so many lies, I'd forgotten how to trust sincerity. Alex opened his phone and showed me a picture. Taken from a slightly elevated angle, it showed me standing among the graduates, the clear focus of the image. Surprisingly, I was beaming, a genuine, unguarded smile. A rarity. "Why didn't you come talk to me?" I asked. He looked away. "Because you were with Ethan." I absorbed this, then shook my head. "But you know I'm not a good person." Twilight deepened, shadows filling the room. The tip of Alex's cigarette glowed like a tiny red ember. "Sarah Williams," he said, his voice low and resonant, "you're complicated, you lie, you're good at pretending. I've seen you at your lowest, and I know all your flaws. But I love you." I didn't answer him immediately. I needed time. This was different, not a fling, not something casual. This was Alex. Meanwhile, Ashley's greed finally caught up with her. The initial success in modeling had only fueled her ambition. But as she tried to climb higher, she found every path blocked. She couldn't replace me. This industry wasn't for just anyone. She hit one dead end after another, eventually crawling back to the piano. But by then, she'd alienated everyone in the Chicago music scene. No one offered her concerts, no invitations to events. Even her fans had abandoned her. Ashley was falling apart. After I shot the Nudes On campaign, her jealousy exploded. She came to New York and confronted me at the studio. "Sarah Williams, was it you?" I looked at her, her face contorted with envy. "What are you talking about? Did you sabotage me? Did you offer me those jobs on purpose, knowing I'd have to cancel my piano engagements? You're trying to ruin me." I smiled sweetly, my voice soft as silk. "How could I do such a thing? Wasn't it a good thing I offered you those opportunities? Those are jobs most newcomers can only dream of. Besides, I didn't force you to take them. You made your choices. You can't blame anyone else." Ashley was speechless, fuming with rage. She threw her iced coffee at me. I didn't hesitate. I called the police. The whole incident was filmed and posted online. The internet sided with me, calling Ashley ungrateful, blaming others for her own greed. Her reputation plummeted. Her parents, my parents, panicked. My father called. "You need to clear this up for Ashley." "How?" I asked. "Do I have to tell you?" He snapped. "Say it was a misunderstanding. No, say the video was edited, that you were trying to make her look bad. Apologize, help her out. Wouldn't that make everyone happy?" I almost laughed. "Why should I take the blame for her? You're the older sister. It's your duty to protect your younger sister. Sarah Williams, I'm warning you, if you don't do what I say, you don't have a home to come back to." Great, I don't want to come back anyway. I'd been planning to spare him some face, but now I had no choice. The next day, I submitted evidence of my father's corruption to the authorities. My father was investigated, his assets seized. Ashley, with no performances and mounting debts, was forced to sell her piano. I couldn't help but feel a pang of something, not quite sympathy, but perhaps a flicker of recognition. If she'd stuck to the piano, she'd still have a livelihood. The story had given her so much, family, beauty, talent, all squandered. I focused on my career, ignoring the Williams family drama. I didn't know danger was lurking. One ordinary evening, my phone died on my way home from work. I was walking alone when a sudden blow to the back of my head sent me into darkness. I woke up in a dark, unfamiliar place, my hands and feet bound, my mouth gagged. This terrifyingly familiar sensation, kidnapped? Trafficked? Fear consumed me. As my eyes adjusted, I realized I was in an abandoned factory. Ethan's warning echoed in my mind. I heard muffled voices outside. "Where's the car? It's better to move her at night. Soon. Someone paid us to grab her. We'll sell her in the mountains. Double profit. Who knows when we'll get lucky like this again." Ice-cold dread washed over me. I surveyed my surroundings. The windows were too high. The only exit was the door, guarded by the two men. There was no escape. "Hey, she looks smart. Should we cut her tongue out first?" "Sure." She won't need to talk where she's going. They entered the room. In that split second, my life flashed before my eyes. I would rather die than be trafficked again. As they approached, I kicked out with all my might, catching one of them off guard. He stumbled back. I didn't care how feral I looked. I was ready to die. What else mattered? They were enraged. They lunged at me, brandishing knives. I closed my eyes, bracing myself to slam my head against the concrete wall. Just then, the metal door burst open. Alex and Ethan. They'd come to rescue me. Alex, with his police training, moved with swift precision. Ethan, raised with a silver spoon, struggled to keep up. The kidnappers had knives. The fight was brutal. Alex was ruthless. Still in his dress shoes and slacks, he stomped on one of the kidnappers' feet, a sickening crunch echoing through the factory. The other kidnapper, enraged, abandoned his fight with Ethan and charged towards me. He was too fast to stop. But Ethan, as if anticipating this, threw himself in front of me. The knife plunged in. Warm blood splattered my face. He'd taken the blow for me, a fatal wound. But Ethan didn't seem to feel it. He looked at me, his gaze gentle, loving. Before collapsing, he whispered, "Sarah." Ethan died before reaching the hospital. The vibrant, flawed man who had both hurt me and saved me was gone. I charged my phone. There was an unread message from Ethan, sent last night. "Sarah, I've kept something from you. I saw 2 endings. In the other one, you have a good life, a happy life. Someone loves you. The only problem is the abandoned factory. But the details are vague. I don't know which factory, or when it happens. Since you rejected me, I've been searching for every abandoned factory in New York, hoping to prevent it altogether. I wanted to warn you, but I was afraid of scaring you, so I couldn't be specific. Sarah, promise me, if something happens, don't grieve. My dear, wicked villain, in the next life, let me find you, okay?" So cunning, Ethan Hughes. He'd found a way to ensure I'd never forget him. I sat in the hospital corridor, weeping. Alex, his body bandaged, sat beside me. He stayed as long as I cried, a silent, steady presence. Later, the police solved the case. The kidnappers revealed their employer's last name, Williams. Ashley, the prime suspect, was taken in for questioning. Much later, Alex told me about Ethan's last request. "Please, rescue her again. And take good care of her." Ethan seemed to have known he would die. I didn't tell Alex about the book, or about Ethan's likely premonition of his own death. I didn't know what emotions had driven him that night. I unwrapped a grape-flavored candy and held it in my mouth, the sweetness a bitter reminder. 2 years later, I was a top model, my career trajectory meteoric. I dedicated myself to charity work, focusing on combating human trafficking. After much deliberation, I decided to show my scars, to use my platform to raise awareness, even if it meant facing scrutiny and judgment. And it did. But Alex gave me strength. On a snowy day, caught in a vivid dream of my past, Alex woke me. He wore an apron, a domestic image at odds with his usual sharp attire. "Breakfast is ready," he announced. I opened my eyes, looked at him standing against the light, reaching out a hand. Just like 10 years ago. "Alex Shaw," I said. Marry me." He was stunned, then overcome with joy. You mean it?" "I do. I bought the ring ages ago. I'll start planning the wedding right now. Do you want a traditional ceremony or something modern? Here or abroad? Outdoors or indoors? What season?" I knew he'd been waiting for this for 2 years. Outside, the snow fell softly. On this snowy day, I finally made peace with my past. I was reborn. Epilogue: Ethan's perspective. I can't describe how I felt when I first read the story. Sarah, kidnapped. Sarah, neglected. Sarah, bullied. Sarah, loving me. Was that person in the book really me? Was I truly that much of a jerk? I'd contacted the media, exposing Sarah's lies, leading to her public humiliation, all to protect another woman. Even her death was partly my fault. I'd arranged to meet Sarah to tell her to leave me alone, knowing she wouldn't refuse my invitation. I'd chosen a remote location because I didn't want to be seen with her, the notorious villain. But that day, Ashley had cramps and needed me. I'd forgotten all about Sarah. I didn't remember until 4 days later. The Ethan in the book hadn't cared. He'd never taken Sarah seriously. Sarah died. I didn't even glance back, too preoccupied with Ashley. Reading those passages made me sick. I learned later that this revulsion, this resistance to the narrative, was the awakening of self-awareness. I refused to follow the predetermined plot. Even though the story might have played out countless times, each time someone read the book. Meaning, Sarah had been kidnapped countless times, and I had indirectly killed her countless times. This realization nearly destroyed me. I went to New York to find Sarah. Having self-awareness was a blessing. I hadn't truly appreciated Sarah before. Now, looking at her, I found her captivating. Her fierce beauty, her defiant spirit, it was everything I'd ever desired. I'd never been attracted to Ashley's delicate innocence. The books, its predetermined settings, were absurd. I missed everything about Sarah, even her teasing, her pretended sweetness. I hated myself for not cherishing her before. Every night, I burned grape-scented candles, lost in memories, clinging to them until dawn. Sarah rejected me repeatedly, each rejection a fresh wound. Then, one day, I saw the story again. It had changed. There were 2 endings now. In this version, Sarah single-handedly turned the tables, then left for New York. Exactly as it had happened in real life. I realized she'd rewritten the narrative. I frantically flipped through the pages. Sarah would be kidnapped again, in an abandoned factory. I couldn't bear the thought of her reliving that trauma. And the story, as if to taunt me, withheld the specifics. But one thing was clear, I would die saving her. I racked my brain. Could I, like Sarah, change the story? Could I escape this fate? I had to find the location, prevent the kidnapping. But it still happened. As if fate was mocking me, every plan fell apart. In a cruel twist of irony, it ended up being just me and Alex who found her. It seemed my death was inevitable. As that thought crossed my mind, I ran towards her without hesitation. The kidnapper was about to attack. My body reacted before my brain could process. As the knife plunged down, all I could see was Sarah. Don't be afraid. This is my choice. But I wanted to say her name one last time, the way I used to, the way that always made her smile and embrace me. So, I whispered, Sarah. It was over. I wish you peace, joy, and a life filled with everything good. When I opened my eyes again, it took a moment to adjust. This was my home, my childhood home in Chicago. But this body, younger, smaller, I checked the date, my heart pounding. I'd been reborn. I was 9 years old again. This year, Sarah was 7. I bolted out of the house, praying I wasn't too late. I ran to the abandoned warehouse district and saw Sarah and Ashley. Ashley was tugging at her sister's arm. Come on, let's go inside. Sarah hesitated. This place is creepy. It could be dangerous. Let's go home, Mom and Dad will be worried. Oh, come on. There's probably tons of candy inside. Ashley insisted, pulling Sarah towards the warehouse. Wait, don't go in there. My heart was racing. Go home, now. Come with me. I grabbed their hands and ran, pulling them away from the warehouse, back towards the safety of the crowds. Sarah looked at me, confused. Who are you? I looked at her, 7 years old, innocent and unaware. My name is Ethan Hughes. Let's be best friends, okay? How good is best friends? She asked. Good enough to stay together forever, I replied. Okay, she agreed. I gave her a grape-flavored candy. This time, I was finally there first.